Hello, this is Jay Mitchell. We are back with another episode of the Libertarian Uncensored podcast, going over all the posts in the Libertarian Uncensored subreddit. Let's get right into it. First, we have CIA blocking release of COVID information lawsuit alleges from Newsweek.com by Chabonet, and I think that's probably true. You know, the CIA and the rest of the deep state, they're very big on controlling the narrative, and this is another example of that. They don't want people seeing what the real information is. They want people seeing what their information is, and not what the real information is. They want to control the narrative. And as I like to say, if you can control the narrative, you can control the people. And that's something I always think is very important. Then we have research behind income inequality debate flawed. New study shows from 2000th Time a Charm from nationalreview.com. And yeah, I definitely think that I would agree with that. The thing with the income inequality debate is ultimately it's trying to create a narrative that, you know, some groups are going to be innately earn more money than others. Well, in reality, that's not true. It's just you know, ultimately it's just the career fields that people go to. You know, like they always try and push stuff like the gender wage gap. Well, in reality, that's mostly because of the fields that men and women both choose to pursue, rather than any sexist paying practices. So that's something that's always important to remember. I'm sure it's the same when it comes to stuff like racism as well. And ultimately, ultimately we need to have an organic economy, and that might mean that some people are paid more than others. And sadly, that's how life is. Some people are going to produce more than others, and others are going to not produce as much, and they'll get paid less as a result. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have Argentina's Milei lifts imports controls and free trade push from Bloomberg.com by Chabonet. And, yeah, I definitely think that's good. You know, it's good that he's supporting, free trade. And I think that's something that's very libertarian, you know. I don't think tariffs are a very libertarian thing because they go against free trade. I'm glad he seems to be getting rid of a lot of the tariffs. Then we have malpractice premiums are hobbling access to gender affirming care for minors from Time.com by Chabonet. And I think, you know, the thing with the gender affirming care for minors is I think it's ultimately the thing with it's if people want to do it, they think they should be able to. But I personally don't think minors can consent to that, just like how they can't consent to sexual intercourse. And that's something that I personally am pretty passionate about. But that being said, I don't like telling people what they can and can't do. If the doctors think they can do that, you know, I think they should be able to. And ultimately, if people think it's a NAP violation and want to act accordingly, I think they should be able to as well. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have queer lives are not up for debate, and that's a cross post from the LGBT subreddit from Air Silver One, and that's a post. It's a post that says queer lives are not up for debate. Armed minorities are harder to eradicate, and it's a picture I think of some assault rifle, and then over the queer flag and the with two anarchist symbols. And I think I would agree with that. Ultimately, I personally think everyone deserves the right to self-defense. And if anyone wants to have a firearm, they should be able to get one and defend themselves however they feel like. If they ever go on attack, I think people should be able to defend against them as well. So that's my thoughts on that issue. Ultimately everyone does have the right to self-defense, so that's always important to remember. You know, like a lot of people these days only think their group has the right to self-defense, but ultimately I would say everyone has the right to self-defense. Even someone like Kyle Rittenhouse, who a lot of people on the left don't like, he had the right to self-defense as well, even if he wasn't, even if even if he was more on the right than on the left. So that's my fault on that issue. And we have Africa doesn't need more government aid, it needs free markets from Mises.org by Chabonet. And I would agree with that. The thing is with Africa is that, you know, it's commonly looked over when people look at the world and world news and world politics. And ultimately, I think that is a shame because I think Africa it has the potential to be a booming market soon, and I think we'll see that as time goes on. Especially if they manage to figure out to get rid of to rein in government corruption. Then we have the UN wants the government to promote meat alternatives, namely lab-grown meat and plant-based fake meat imitations. That translates to taxes on farm-raised meat, government subsidies for meat alternatives, and other red tape data influencing consumer behavior. From RealClearScience.com by Chabanay. And I would agree with that. We shouldn't have the government pushing for people to eat lab grown meat or bugs or anything like that. I mean, that's what they're trying to do here. They're trying to push their agenda, and that's why I think soon I don't think meat's going to be illegal at this point because because they'll use the climate alarmism to control the narrative and say, oh, we can't make meat anymore, it's too dangerous. But they'll still eat. The elites will still get to eat meat. The common man won't get to eat meat, but the elites will still get to eat meat. And the only thing we'll get to eat is bugs. And this is just another example of how they're pushing us in that direction. Then we have how UNWRA grooms terrorists by providing the residents of the Gaza Strip with various services. UNRWA exempted Hamas from its responsibilities as the governing body and allowed it instead to invest resources in building tunnels and manufacturing weapons. From GatesstoneInstitute.com or .org, and that's by Chabanay. And I think that is a important note. It's the UN, for all their talks of peace, that they do fund a lot of shady institutions like Hamas, and that's important to remember because that they're providing resources to Hamas. They aren't directly providing resources to Hamas, but in the case like this, they're indirectly doing so, and that's something that I don't think is very libertarian. And I personally kind of sympathize more with Palestine a little more than Israel, but even with that, I think the thing is that Hamas is not really a libertarian group. If they had their way, you'd have very unlibertarian Sharia law implemented, and I don't think that is a libertarian ideal. Then we have Australian medical regulator finally relaxes COVID gag order. There is no place for anti-vaccination messages in professional health practice, but any promotion of anti-vaccination claims, including on social media advertising, may be subject to regulatory action from brownstow.org by Chabanay. And I think that that isn't good. I'm glad they're relaxing it, but I don't think the state should be telling to professional medical people what they can and can't say, and that's something that I think is very authoritarian. That they want to. I personally take the vaccines when they're offered, mainly because of my parents. If I didn't, I probably. I might not take them. I don't really care. I don't really care either way. If you want to take the vaccines, take the vaccines. But I don't think we should be justifying censoring people if they want to say stuff, messages that could be interpreted as anti-vaccine, because that's free speech, especially if they're medical professionals. They have they earn their degrees, so they should have a valid opinion as well. And even if it goes against what the rest of the medical professionals say, because that's how they try and bully people into getting a medical consensus. And I don't think you should bully people who disagree. We can't just have this medical consensus and all dissent is outlawed. I think that is increasingly the field we're going to. There's going to be this consensus, and all dissent is going to be outlawed, and that's not something that I think is very libertarian. I think you should always be able to dissent. And that's something that I'm very passionate about. We need to support free speech, and dissent is a big part of that. Then we have GOP congressman Travel to Uganda to support anti-LGBTQ death penalty law from Salon.com by Clorox. And I don't think that's good. I know Salon's a bit of a left-wing outlet, but even then, I don't think that is something that's very good. I personally think, it's okay to not like the gays and think their lifestyle is sinful, but, I don't think you should be supporting laws that, imprison them or give them the death penalty. That's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have California to find stores that don't have a gender neutral kids toy section 2024 from Fox News from Chabonet. And yeah, I definitely don't think that's very libertarian. Uh, I think the problem with that is that they say it's only going to be applicable to large chains, not small stores. But even then, I don't think the state should be telling people what they can and can't organize their store by. Then we have let foreign airlines serve domestic routes in the U.S. from Reason.com by 2000 Time of Charm. And I would agree with that, yeah, because I think if anyone wants to cover it, even if they're foreign airlines, I think they should be able to. I don't like telling people they can and can't do, and that includes private businesses. They should be able to fly whatever routes they want to. And we have how FDR emasculated the black press in World War II from Reason.com by 2000 Time of Charm. And I agree, FDR wasn't a good president, and he was very authoritarian, and he threw Japanese people in internment camps, but somehow people always seem to ignore that whenever it comes to looking at his legacy, because his economics were good, and that's why what people want. I think his economics were garbage as well, but a lot of his supporters think his economics were good, and that you know that's why they usually justify a lot of his bad actions, like the internment camps, or as this article says, how he clamped down on the actions of the black press, because essentially that was how eventually I think the Democrats managed to increasingly gain all the African American vote, and they kind of regard them now as just automatic votes for them, and I don't think that's something that should happen. I think that's slowly turning, as well as you see a lot of blacks starting to leave the party, and I think that's good for them. I personally think the Republican Party and Democratic Party are different. The switching between them isn't that as big a leap as a lot of people make it out to be. But I think we shouldn't be just we should, no one is entitled to your vote, and that's something that I'm very passionate about. Then we have just over 3 weeks away now. Who do you have winning the NH primaries of the duopoly? And I linked to the Wikipedia art page, Wikipedia grids for the Democrat primary and on January 23rd, and the Republican primary on January 23rd. The candidates for the Democratic primary on January 23rd look to be Joe Biden, who's going to be a writing candidate, Marianne Williamson, Dean Phillips, Teresa Bukovinec, Vernon Supreme Roy Prince, President Arbody, Evan Cambridge, Gabriel Cornejo, Mark Stork Greenstein, Tom Coos, Paul Vilacava, Starlock, Frankie Lasada, Stephen P. Lyons, Raymond Michael Moros, Derek Nadeau, Jason Michael Palmer, Armando Mondo, Perez Serrato, Donald Picard, Richard Rist, and John Vale, and other write-in. So, and then the Republican candidate seems to be Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Nikki Haley, B. Cronshaw, Chris Christie, Doug Burgum, who's withdrawn, Ace Hutchinson, John Anthony Castro, Sam Sloan, Scott Allen Ayers, Ryan Brinkley, David Stuckenberg, Robert S. Carney Jr., Peter Jiddick, Donald Kjorns, Mary Maxwell, Glenn J. McPeters, Scott Pearson Morrell, Darius L. Mitchell, and Rachel Swift. And I said, I would personally go for Supreme for the Dems and Sloan for the GOP, since they are both former LP members, but I think the winners are going to be Biden for the Dems and Trump for the GOP, though I can see Phillips taking it for the Dems as well, since Biden is a bit of an uphill battle as a write-in. His campaign is not registering him, since the National DC has told the NHDNC to move the primary back so they can put more Biden-friendly South Carolina as the first primary, but the NHDNC has refused to change the date. And the other comp I evidently said, I love the comedian ignoring the fact that whichever party is an incumbent is not too primary for president, but don't wait for decades. And I said, they always hold primary. It's often not competitive, but it always happens. And I added that the guy Randall Terry, the guy who dressed up in the Obama mask and said, oh, give unto Obama that that they did that whole skit. He said he actually managed to beat Obama in the Oklahoma Panhandle in the 2012 Dem primaries. I think that was also interesting to note. So yeah, I think we'll see how this goes down. I think it'll be interesting. And then we have when the state debates rights away, debate its own, and it's the crosswords from the LGBT subreddit, and it's the Drake meme with him giving the hand to the state being your right to exist, and then him pointing at the debating state right to exist. And I agree with that. The state has no legitimate right to exist, I would say, because ultimately the state is ultimately just socially logical, socially imagined. It's not really real. The force it issues is real, but the idea of its monopoly on force and the idea that it can control everything is not really real. It's just socially imagined. Then we have California Pizza Hut's lay off all delivery drivers at a minimum wage increase and that's a post from USA Today from 2000 Time of Charm. And yeah, I definitely think that's a good idea why you shouldn't be raising the minimum wage, because it makes it harder for people to justify making these putting these low income jobs that could be people's only source of income. I like what 2000 Time of Charm commented here. The real minimum wage is always zero. I think that's a good quote. Then we have protecting Second Amendment rights, defending individual liberty and self-defense from exhilarated chess. And I would agree that is something to, we need to support Second Amendment rights and the right of everyone's self-defense. I did go over that earlier, and I still support that. Then we have the elections are only legitimate when my party wins, from Defiant L's, and that's a tweet from USA Today Politics on January 20th, 2022. President Joe Biden said Wednesday the 2022 midterm elections could be easily be legitimate if Congress does not pass voting rights legislation. On November 2nd, 2022, the USA Today Politics will be Biden will address Fed election matters in a speech at 7 p.m. Wednesday from Washington's Union Station. And I said, Democrats, I think they're both bad when it comes to denying elections. Democrats are frankly disparate, controlling narrative when it comes to claiming elections are rigged, and their GOP is. They don't directly say they are rigged. Instead, they usually use words like voter suppression and Russian interference that pretty much mean the same thing. So then we have, it's wild that we've practically criminalized rudeness in the USA, but the military can blow up people overseas with no consequence. Overseas with no consequences. Randall McCardle on Twitter, I posted that, and I said, it's pirates and emperors. When the state does something, it is law. When the individual does it, it's crime. Ultimately, people always think the individuals, what the individuals do is always worse than the state. That's why, they want to make misgendering people on purpose illegal. Well, the state can just bomb away in Syria and Iraq, and they won't really care, because people are really only concerned with issues that affect them. I think that's another big part of it, I would say. Then we have leprosy, polio, malaria, TB, measles, and mass funding screening illegal immigration from RealCoolerWire.com by Chabonet. And I agree. I personally am more pro-immigration, but you do have to consider, always remember the consequences of mass immigration, how they might bring disease and crime into the country, especially some of the ones that aren't as, upstanding. And then we have Seattle Parks Department friends to uproot Bill Elm Garden from RealChangeNews.com by Frosty Slowman. And I think that is something that, isn't good, but, ultimately the state does have a monopoly on force, and that does include when it supports you and when it's against you. People always only really care when it's against them, but, sometimes it's used for them as well, and that's how I think it's always important to remember as well. Then we have supermarkets in Argentina reduce prices by 20% from latest rear price controls from Chabonet, and that's and that's crosswords from the economy subreddit. It looks like some pictures from Argentinian videos like Perfil Cordoba, El Economista, MDZ, and I think that's good. That's why we can't have the state telling people what prices they can and can't have, and I think that's very authoritarian. So I think we're gonna wrap up there. I'll see you guys next episode. Bye.